Too long.
When did John Lee retire?
I don't know.
Because I came on in '95,
Is that right?
and our first operation was in Norman, Oklahoma in '95.
Is that right?
And then it seemed like it wasn't maybe 2 years later he decided that he was going to retire, and then you and I took over
And then after
for
a while,
a couple of years,
then
and
we
finally got tired of that and
got Berkey.
got Berkey to do it.
It's kind of hard to work on it all night and then fly the next day. It's got to be, especially when the generator falls out.
Should we get started officially here?
Let's go.
Okay, for the record, I'm Rob Campbell, and it is July, what did we decide? 20th, the 40th anniversary of the Moonwalk, 2009. We are in the South Dakota School of Mines. This is Charlie Summers and Tom Root, and we're going to talk about the T28 and related things. First of all, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I know you're very busy today. You two are both pilots. Could we just start, maybe you first, Charlie, just give us some background, how you got into flying, how you sort of came to be involved with the T28.
Okay.
Where are you from?
I'm from Hershey, Nebraska originally. That's and started flying in Nebraska in college actually, and got my commercial pilot certificate from the CAA, the Civil Aeronautics Authority, before the FAA. We won't go any further back than that. And I flew civilian for 3 years, I guess, through college, and then after that I went in the military.
When you say flew civilian, you mean just for fun, or you had a job?
It was for fun primarily. I tried to get a job, but that's why I went in the Air Force.
I see. And that was when you went into the Air Force?
I went in the Air Force in 1957.
Okay.
And went through pilot training there, and then spent 24 years in the Air Force. Primarily flying fighters, F-100, most of the time for about 3,000 hours, and then a short time in the F-4.
What's the F-4? Another fighter?
Yeah.
Okay.
Two-seat fighter, 2 engines, and the F-100 single seat, single engine fighter.
24 years, so 1957 plus 24 is 81?
Yes, I retired from the Air Force in 1981.
So you're a full career Air Force guy.
Yes, I completed my tour.
You fought in Vietnam, correct?
I went there 3 times.
You shot down in Vietnam.
In 1965.
How'd that go?
Pretty well. I'm here. So that was a good outcome. It's had some side benefits that I don't enjoy, but having broken my back and a few things which will bother me for, well, as long as I have a back. So, but it worked out okay.
So you got out of the Air Force, you said in 81.
81, yes.
Where were you and what did you do and what did you do after the Air Force?
Yes, I left the Air Force at 81 at MacDill Air Force Base, which is Tampa, Florida. And immediately, actually before I retired, I was flying civilian as an instructor for flight school. I went from there and set up my own business and started flying with flying aircraft for companies. I flew for the telephone company, a construction company, and I did that until my wife, who's also in the Air Force, got reassigned. She was at Tampa when I retired. She got assigned to Maxwell, which is at Montgomery, Alabama. So I had to pack up, follow as a camp follower, and follow her to Montgomery. But I got a flying job there with a realty company, and flew with them.
Who were all, what kind of planes did all these companies need flying around? Is this jetting around executives or?
Mostly twin engine. They were mostly Piper twins. I flew a Beech twin in Montgomery. And it was mainly moving executives, or in the construction, they moved a lot of their architects and job foremen around to different jobs in Florida.
Okay. So how did you come to Rapid City, the T28?
Well, the reason I came to Rapid City is Jackie, my wife, got assigned to Ellsworth. So I came here and I actually had several jobs here. I flew freight for a while at night for WestJet in an old 310. I was also the director of maintenance for their maintenance program for a year or so. And I flew charter. And then I, at that time, also became a designated examiner for the FAA to give pilot ratings.
Now, how typical is it for a pilot to have this, to also be a mechanic?
It
How'd
must be pretty common because both of us are A&Ps, but not actually that common because there's separate tracks.
Sure.
So you have to, and most pilots are so involved with the flying part they don't get involved in the maintenance part.
So how did this start for you? Way back, or is this after the Air Force, or?
No, I did run a maintenance squadron in the Air Force in Vietnam out of necessity. But I basically, when I was spraying in West Texas, fixed the airplane. So after doing it for a year and a half, that qualified me, after actually 2 years, qualified me to go just take the tests and become a mechanic.
Were you always mechanically inclined? Is this a natural thing, or was it just practical?
No, yes, I built race cars, and we built anything that would, anything with an engine, we would build and then destroy it.
So that brought you to Rapid City. How did you get involved with the School of Mines and the T28 and all of that?
Well, since I was here working in aviation, I also flew some night medical for the hospital. From that, I just basically knew, I'm trying to think of his name, Dan Custis. And I talked to him and he said, yeah, I'm doing it all alone at that time. He said I could use a backup so that we could share the load because he would go on deployment for the entire deployment.
Mm-hmm.
So from that, I interviewed, and there were a couple of other people, but at that time the requirement was that you needed to live in Rapid City, or at least in South Dakota, to do it because of the availability.
Mm-hmm.
So I got the job and started with Dan Custis. He and I flew together, sharing the load, and then Dan had to quit because of health. So then I took over by myself.
Do you know how long, so Dan was the sole T28
Pilot.
for how long, do you know?
You know, I think I probably flew it the longest, which was about 10 years. I think Dan flew it maybe 6 or 7 years. I'm not really sure.
And his name is Custis, C-U-S-T-I-S?
Yes.
He's not still living, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, he is?
Yeah, he's not living, no.
Oh, he's not
No,
living.
his
That's what I
health,
thought.
he died of cancer many years ago.
Right.
But he ran the FBO Eagle, not Eagle, it was something Star Aviation
That's right.
at Spearfish.
So what year was that you started? Do you know?
When did the program end?
2003.
Okay, I started in 93 then.
That sounds about right.
92 or 93. The first year I didn't fly, I just went on the deployment and did groundwork. And then the
And
next
Dan
year.
still did all the flying that
Yeah,
first year,
Dan
that
still
first
did
summer?
all the flying then,
That was for about 1 year that you overlapped?
yeah.
Tom, can we back up and get you up to speed here? Where are you from? What's your background, and how did you come to this same job?
Well, I also have a flew in college, and was in the ROTC, and I went to pilot training in the Air Force. And I graduated in 75, went on active duty in 76. By the time I went to my first operational squadron, it was in Kunsan, Korea in 98. It had been spring of 98. There's a whole lot of training that goes on in there. By the time you finally graduate and get to your first operational squadron, and it was F4 Phantoms. And Charlie was the wing commander at Kunsan Air Base when I showed up in 1978, in the spring of 1978. And he and I were not real close friends. He was the wing commander, and he didn't have any time for the young lieutenant. So, but he was seeing Jackie, and I kind of made a pass at Jackie, and she said, I'm with somebody. I said, who are you with? And in walks the wing commander. And so I suggested that perhaps, discretion being the better part of valor, I went about my own business. However, years later, our paths crossed again. I having gone from Kunsan down to Clark for about 2.5 years, and ended up going back to Kunsan, flying the F-16. And then I was married to a captain nurse, and we all ended up in MacDill together. And my wife got together with Jackie, and they became good friends. And we had dinner a couple of times, and then before long, they disappeared and went off to Maxwell. And I got out of the Air Force. Tactical Air Command said, Tom, we're not going to move you. We're out of money. So you can stay as an instructor in the F-16 like you have been for the last 4 years. You can stay as an instructor for another 4 years, or we can give you a non-flying assignment. And my wife wanted to go to some other additional career enhancing training in Wichita Falls, Shepherd Air Force Base. And Jackie had left Maxwell and went to Shepherd, and we all arrived together. And so Charlie and I, we solidified our relationship and he and I were working together on airplanes in his little job, which got me going. I'd like to think I'm mechanically inclined, and that was back in 1984, and since then, on and off again, we have worked on airplanes together. And then they disappeared over the horizon and ended up in Ellsworth. And in 1995, I get a telephone call from Charlie. He says, I need someone that can fly formation, can fly a T28, and wouldn't mind going into a thunderstorm. Do you know anybody?
Didn't get a response.
I said,
Hello?
I said, no, man, I'm already there. So, but I lived in Texas at the time, but I was working for a company that would allow me to, I was on a week and off a week. I was flying the U.S. mail contract for that Emory Worldwide had in 727s. It was all night freight. So had on a week, off a week, and so I could take a week off and run up and I'd work on the airplane. And because working on the airplane for all those years and different airplanes and things, I finally got myself into a position where I could document all of that, and the FAA allowed me to take my test. And now I'm an aircraft and power plant mechanic as well, which served me well as the T28 program progressed, because we got into the nuts and bolts, no pun intended, of the airplane, and it kind of helped, I think.
Now, when you say fly formation, he called you up and said, I need someone that can fly formation. What does that mean?
Like this, you know, there are times when we ran a program out of Fort Collins, Colorado, with Allied Signal and Raytheon and who else? There was somebody else, a third party.
NASA was in it.
NASA, that
Was in it, piggybacking on the data.
they were kind of helping pay for it too through the
Yeah.
National Science Foundation. But the project was, they were building a software program so that they could best predict where the most turbulence was in a thunderstorm. And the reason being is, flying commercial jets for Continental Airlines, we have a color radar, and that radar will project a picture of the storm
In the cockpit.
in the cockpit. And it will be bright red where it's most concentrated rain, and then it'll go to yellow where it's not quite so, and green where it's probably going to be a little bumpy, but not just a light rain. However, what they wanted is a fourth color in there, some kind of a magenta color that would say, it's red here and it's heavy precipitation, but it's really turbulent in this magenta. And they were building the software program. They'd take a look at all of the weather returns, and they'd say, okay, well, this is where we predict where all that turbulence is going to be. And that was our program. Now, the airplane's festooned with instrumentation, and we would fly into thunderstorms, and all of that information would be stored on board and telemetered to the ground. But in this particular project, there were two other airplanes. There was an Electra
And a
and a
Saberliner.
Saberliner.
Do you remember the name of this project? Was this, or what year it was? This is a T28 project.
It was the
Yeah.
T28 project.
T28 was a part of the project.
Right,
It was a
right.
big project.
Right.
And
But their problem is they couldn't fly in hail. Hail would put them out of business.
Right. But this was somewhere around 1995.
yeah, it was probably
Or some-
98-ish, I think.
Okay.
And anyway, to get back to your original question, in order for us to do what we wanted to do and for them to get the data they needed, we had to join up, and you had me, and you had an Electra, and either I was flying formation him or him, and then you had this Saberliner was a jet, and they would use, they'd track me with their radar, and they would point me where they wanted me to go through the cloud. And we all drive up to the storm, and I'd go through, and they'd break off and go this way, and the Saberliner would go up over the top. So they would have this three-dimensional model, what I'm seeing actually in there, what they're seeing in their radar, and what the guy is seeing from above looking down, because they had down-looking radar. So they put this picture all together with what I've stored on board and what they telemeter to the ground, and they built this software program that allows it. And just as an aside, and I love telling this story to my first officers, but we have classic 737s, and there's a program on there that tells us about wind shear. And you push the button, and the test voice comes over and says, "Go around, wind shear ahead, wind shear ahead," and it yells at you. And while I was working on the airplane, that was the project that I went airborne and flew through the hail and cleaned all the lights off the airplane.
Oh, you can tell me about that later.
Yeah, I'll tell you how cleverly that came about, because we were jury-rigging the generator to keep it running, that's why.
Anyway, I'm working on the airplane in this voluminous hangar, and it had great acoustics in it. And this guy's kind of standing down there, he's talking at me, and he's telling me he's part of the wind shear program. I said, "Well, we have that on our T30 or our 737s." He goes, "Yeah, I know, I was involved with that program." I said, "Yeah?" He said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, when we wanted to put a woman's voice on that recording, but 8 of us, we decided, no, it had to be a commanding male voice. And we all stood in the line with a microphone, and we gave it our shot, and I won." I said, "Really? Let me hear it." And he goes, "Go around, wind shear ahead." And I go, "You're the guy, you're the guy." So I've actually met this voice from that project. But anyway, that's why you have to fly formation, because we'd drive through the storm, and we'd all have to get together on the other side. So you have to kind of join up.
And you had to compare what you were reading, what they were reading, so.
So you have to be able to fly a formation, join up, get close, so that they can direct you where you're going, and you have to be able to do that without hitting anybody.
See, I always imagined the T28 flying alone.
Usually
It did.
Usually did.
In the storm, but there were a lot of times we flew formation to calibrate instruments.
But actually getting together before and after the storm was significant so that you could, compare the instruments?
Yep.
Or-
And the other thing is, we went through first, and if we got any hail or lightning, we had to tell them right away,
Oh, I see.
because they would abort and say, even above or below or around, they'd say, "We don't want to get."
Because they couldn't get even that close.
Well, the Saberliner would shut the engines probably with hail in the intakes. And the other bird, which was a
The Electra.
Convair. Convair. Remember the big props?
Yeah.
I think it was a Convair. It was a prop airplane. And he couldn't handle the hail either. So they were really scary about hail. If we got hail, they said, "Yeah, let us know. We're not going there." But it was an interesting project. I think it was interesting because it put a lot of elements together that we probably could have done on other projects, but the big limiter was money. There were a lot of people putting money in that project, and the two companies that brought the airplanes in, those are high dollar airplanes. I mean, they had people inside monitoring stuff, and they were, but that's the big thing. If you don't want to go in hail, and you don't want to maybe go in heavy rain, but by the same token, you don't want to go in turbulence.
So that project was all about the turbulence.
Turbulence, that's
That
what
was
they were
the
there.
focus.
Their main focus.
Was that like an NSF? Oh, you don't know. Was that an NSF science project or was it a
NSF
commercial
was
kind
in
of
it.
thing?
NASA had, remember they had that
That's
little
right.
trailer there, and the NASA people were getting data.
Yeah.
That from, but the other thing, I think, Andy would know more about it because Andy was there.
Andy Detweiler.
Yeah, Andy Detweiler, and also, gracious, I forgot him, Dr. Smith.
Mhm.
But there were two different companies with the two different airplanes. So I don't know how much data they were, because they were working on different things at the same time, but you always wonder, you
These
know.
are two commercial companies aiming
Yeah.
toward commercial products for
Yeah.
the aviation
Yeah,
industry.
so I think there probably was some data that's why there were so many people there.
Oh, I see.
Everybody, and you know, and we had a big meeting before we'd go, and everybody'd say, here's what we're gonna do, yeah, okay. But it was a coordination problem that if you just go up in T28 and go through, it made it more complicated because.
And where was this? Do you remember where that?
We flew out of.
Fort Collins.
Fort Collins,
Collins.
the main airport.
And that was one summer or a part of one summer?
Yeah.
Yep,
They wanted to compare our data with the data
Yeah.
they were collecting from their radar.
Right.
And the downlooking radar from the
Yeah.
Saberliner.
Oh, that was
So
the idea of the Saberliner going up, is to
Yeah,
look down with
right,
radar.
right.
I see.
and then the other one would kind of get off to the side to stay out of the main part, but still get data. That was the year, I think, that we put the cameras on.
The Discovery Channel wanted to have some cameras on the wingtips
They
Oh.
wanted pictures of the airplane from the wingtip.
while you're flying through the
While you're
storm.
flying
So
through the
looking
storm.
at the-
Looking at the
the-
side of the airplane.
Looking at you, basically.
Well, kind of looking at the
Yeah,
cockpit
yeah.
area.
The cockpit, yeah.
But that was interesting because we put one on the right wing. We fixed it on there and we came back and said, do you have a spare?
Camera was gone.
Camera was gone.
Did it literally last not one flight?
One flight.
And it was
was
just
gone.
long gone?
It was gone.
It was
So
just
then-
beaten off of there?
Then we re-engineered the duct tape installation, but the next, we did get a camera to stay on the wing, and it did take pictures, and my perspective, it showed an interesting thing, because the wings on most airplanes move a little, because there's flexibility so they won't snap off. The T28 was
It was rock solid.
rock solid.
Is that right?
And I think it was two things. It's a pretty solid airplane because it's built as a trainer. But when we put the armor plate on the leading edges of the wing, I think we made it really solid.
Stiffer.
Yeah, it
Plus they beefed the spar when they
beefed the
rebuilt it.
spar a little bit on it too, so.
The spar is like the
The
I-beam?
main, yeah, the
Main
I-beam and the
I-beam,
wing.
Yeah.
And so the combination of all that, I was just kind of surprised that that camera, nothing moved. The one when it finally stayed there.
Wasn't that the first time we introduced the little video camera that was on the forward edge of the pylon? Wasn't that the first time we put that on? Because we couldn't get any,
We were having,
the hail was putting holes in it too, so
Yeah.
it was kind of worthless.
that was my famous statement. We designed this camera. There'd been various cameras on the T28, but we put a video camera on finally. And we put it on the right wing in a little pod. And in fact, the School of Mines had an engineering class that designed the pod, and so it wouldn't fog over. Well, they put something in there and it fogged over. So
And
we
then the hail beat the
essentially,
lens out of it.
so essentially, we left the opening open so that we wouldn't get that problem with fogging over and icing over. Because we said if it's open, the camera will get a shot. And I looked at it with my vast experience in engineering and said, size of that hole is very small. And the camera, I said, chances of hail ever going in there are 0. Came back after the first flight, and the camera is taking pictures, and all there's crap flying by, and pretty soon it goes. That was the end of the tape. In fact, I think Andy's got the tape. And then we looked in the hole and said, "Where's the camera?" It was back in the back of the pod somewhere. Sure enough, a piece of hail went right in the hole and wiped it out.
Well, you didn't say 0.0.
No, I said the chances are just.
Interestingly enough, that camera did play a role back, I don't know, when was the tornado? When we were in
Goodland, Kansas.
That had to be 2000, I think. Anyway, the point is that that camera did play a good role for Tom Warner, and some of the information that he got off that video camera, he was able to write his master's thesis on.
With the lightning strike and all that, and the camera position was such that you could actually see the prop, couldn't you?
Yeah, just to the outside of the
Tom added a board, and Tom had most of the emergencies in the T28.
Tom Root.
Tom Root, because and the camera was very graphic. He was on very short final, and you see the same prop blade, and the prop blade is not moving.
Just because it's not moving.
But the engine quit. So that's significant in the.
Now, are you still talking about the camera that's way out in the wing?
Yeah,
It's about midway.
Oh, it's about midway.
On the right wing.
But you can still catch the prop right in
Yeah,
front.
kind of
You
in a
just-
peripheral side.
You could
Occasionally
just see
it's-
the prop going by.
Oh,
So it was.
But
Yeah.
but this is not the camera that I've seen that's behind Tom Warner's head.
No, we
that's
had
a different
cameras.
camera.
They put cameras all over the
I see.
cockpit. Yeah, we had interesting one. Somebody put one down here, so it would look up at the pilot.
And get the facial expressions and.
So I'm flying it, and I keep doing this. Got back, and the camera people looked at the video. They said, "Well, you kept looking at the camera. That was bad." I said, "Excuse me. Let me explain where the alcohol switch is. It's right there." And I said, "I turn alcohol on every time I go in, and so I'm turning the alcohol. I'm not looking at you guys. You put the camera where I've got to turn a switch on every time I go in, and every time I go out, I got to shut it off."
The alcohol is the de-icing
No, well, for the engine.
for the engine.
We had alcohol we pumped into the engine.
To burn the alcohol.
It would burn it, but it was also to keep the ice from the engine intake.
Right.
Because
That's right.
if you had a turbocharged airplane, or if you had a fuel-injected airplane, you don't have a carburetor to ice up. But this airplane has it just like the old airplanes. It had a carburetor, so if you're sucking in ice or even moist air,
Right.
when it gets in the venturi, it'll freeze. So we had to use carburetor heat to put heat in there.
Mhm.
But that's insufficient in a thunderstorm. So we have pumped in alcohol.
Yeah.
And Tom flight checked the alcohol system.
Yeah, it was actually an anti-ice, not necessarily a de-ice.
Yeah, it
You
was
get
to
a
keep it from forming.
I
keep
see.
it from forming.
But
And
this is
we
'cause
also,
Go ahead.
also had a separate tank that would sling alcohol along the propeller.
Yeah.
Oh, I
and,
see.
keep ice from forming on the propeller.
Just because it's alcohol and was it melty ice or does it?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
freezes
kinda.
at a much lower temperature than the ice is.
right.
But Tom, I told Tom one of my guidelines was if you don't have alcohol, you don't go in. And Tom flight checked that theory, and he went in without alcohol, and the engine quit.
This time.
No, this Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just,
And
You wanna
so
tell me- you
then
wanna
when he
tell me
came
that
back,
story?
he said you shouldn't go in if you don't have alcohol. Really, I agree with that.
I was an ice cube for about 12,000 feet. I came out as a blivet at 22, and the airplane really was just sort of going in that direction. And when we finally got down to about 11,000 feet, the ice shed off because we were operating in the summertime.
Right.
And the ice shed off, and the propeller is still kind of turning because wind forces do that. And once it got down there,
Started
it
up.
warmed up and started up, and life is good again.
So why'd you go in without alcohol?
Well, we didn't have really any
Indicator.
any indicators of
Yeah,
the volume we had left.
Oh, I
It's
see.
a tank sitting behind you, and you kind of kept track of time, and if you thought there wasn't alcohol, you probably shouldn't go in.
It was full when you took off.
Oh, yeah.
And so you had used a bunch of alcohol, and they said, how about one more pass? And you
That's
said,
it.
sure.
Yeah.
And you tried to use the alcohol.
Andy's
and-
down there begging, saying, "Can you give me one more pass?" Okay, Andy, yeah, okay. Always wanted one more pass.
And so the ice froze up the engine or the prop, or?
Well, and remember we were talking about carburetor icing.
Oh, that's what happened.
Froze up the
It
carburetor.
just kinda-
So you don't get any air, you don't get any,
There's no air coming in, so nothing's burning, so nothing's going.
That's right.
And so you become a glider.
Exactly. Like a lot like a '57 Buick, I would say.
yeah, same glide ratio as a 57 Buick.
Yeah, that little camera that was on the wingtip, it frosted over that day, and it became a perfect filter for Tom Warner to actually see the lightning bolt
That hit him.
that came across in front of the airplane. As I was flying, I said, "Whoa, there's a lightning strike, or there's a lightning bolt or something." And sure enough, the time hack that was on the tape matched perfectly with what was the time hack on the video camera. And it was a perfect picture because of the ice on the front of the camera had iced up and provided a perfect filter. And he was able to coordinate all of that, and that was part of his master's thesis.
Huh.
But, you know.
So the camera was worthwhile. And we did figure out how to keep it in there.
What was the, what's the point of having a camera looking straight forward? What would you see normally? I haven't
Lightning.
seen-
Well, you could actually see hail before it would ice over. And it would give you an icing indication because you're looking, it's looking good. You're seeing, and then
But we're not seeing what's being recorded.
No.
we're not seeing the camera. The camera is being recorded in a recorder in the back.
In a tape.
Yeah,
And you
so
see once
it doesn't
while.
help us
I
fly.
see.
It's just for data for the coffee drinkers at the radar.
But they did get real information out of that,
Oh,
they
yeah.
felt. This was not just for, I mean, the one looking up at your face is just for
That was
TV.
just for PR.
PR, right.
Yeah, that was just, so that when Discovery Channel or whoever was taping us would say, "Oh, here's a picture of a scared pilot."
And-
Yeah.
Yes.
You have an oxygen mask on, you couldn't see that.
All
anyway.
we see is two beady eyes. It's not,
The one looking over Tom Warner's shoulder, is that just PR or is that?
PR.
That's just PR. That's not.
we didn't
real.
have much in the cockpit except a cockpit recorder that you talk to.
Right.
Because you had a hot mic, you could say, you know, that was close, or you usually call out lightning and call out different things.
We suggested hanging a white sheet in front of the airplane and just have you sit there like this, like you're in turbulence, and then you wouldn't have to take the airplane. Wouldn't have to
get
fly.
airborne.
And when Tom Warner played that audio, Charlie, of you bouncing around, and were you just hamming it up? Do you know the one I'm talking about? When he played this at the wake,
Oh, no, that's the way you bounce around.
that wasn't you helping them out with a little PR for the
No.
Discovery Channel. That was just you talking to the radar guys.
Or talking
just-
to myself, I talk to myself a lot.
Sure.
But yeah, if you would hit your head on the canopy, even if you're strapped in tight.
Hey, Wayne Sand told me that once he was in the cloud, he would just lower his seat all the way down so he's not even looking at the windshield. Did you guys do that?
I never moved it, I don't know what Tom did. When it got really loud,
Yeah.
because you can hear the hail over your headset,
Mhm.
I just kind of, you know.
You mean
because
through the headset, despite the headset? you can
Despite
hear
the
it.
headset, you
Yeah.
can hear hail. It sound to me like somebody on the windscreen's pounding with a hammer. And when it does that, you're naturally gonna, you know. But
You just sit a little lower.
I didn't put the seat down because with my luck, I put the seat down, it wouldn't go back up, and I'd be landing like this.
That sucker that seat
It's tough.
at least for a while, that seat had a hard time getting it up and down. It was spring-loaded, and your weight would push the seat down when you released the latch, and then when you kind of took your weight off, it would come back up.
Exactly.
But it wouldn't come back up, and we grab a hold of it and you pull it up. And we were,
I know.
we were in Albuquerque, and Charlie had It sort of mentioned that he had worked on the seat, but wasn't paying attention. And knowing that the seat was giving us a hard time coming up, wanted to adjust it for my flight, I reached down and I grabbed a hold of the release, and as I went to release it, it shot back up
To the top.
to the top and dragged my hand with it, and it opened a gash on my hand. I'm bleeding like a stuck pig, and Charlie goes, "What's the problem? You want some duct tape on that?"
And I said, "Put your glove on, you'll never know it, go fly." I had to take the mission. That's the only time we made a pilot switch about engine start.
And I went to the hospital and I got about 6 stitches after that.
And he got stitched up, and I'm up there saying, "Tom, what were we gonna do?" This is when we were flying, again, formation. We were flying formation on a powered glider in turbulence and lightning down at Las Cruces, New Mexico, with their program down there. They had a weather program.
That was formation also.
Oh, yeah.
Huh.
Trying formation on a glider in turbulence, and what would happen is this thing's first slow. I mean, he's smoking maybe, 80, and we're sitting out here just hanging. Sometimes you'd get a little...
Because that's as slow as a T28 can go, and that's as fast as they can go.
That's as fast as he could go, because it's a glider. It's a motor glider. It's got a motor on it.
I heard about this. What's the name of that plane? I talked to this guy.
The Spitfire.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
What's a motored glider? It's supposed to be a glider, but they put an engine on it?
It's a glider configuration. They just put a motor on.
Oh, I see.
And the interesting thing to me was when you were flying formation, is when you get an updraft, the wings would go,
Oh.
and then you knew power, and he would go, and you'd be, oh, because the wings are just really flexible, and you knew he had an updraft when the wings went up, and you knew he's going to gazelle up, and you couldn't stay with him because we're hanging.
How tight are these formations? How far are you actually from the
Well, in that particular one, what we were doing is flying around. There was overhangs. We had on the T28 something called a field mill, which measures electromagnetic energy and particulate matter in clouds. And they were developing a new type of field mill, and they had it on the Spitfire. And they wanted to calibrate theirs with a known quantity of ours.
Because ours
so we
has
had to
been
be
used a while, yeah.
We had to be we weren't overlapping the wings, but we were fairly close
Stay
formation.
as close as we could.
Because you don't want to lose sight of them in the clouds either, so you couldn't get too far away. So you were right there, and your instrumentation, their instrumentation, they compared it, calibrated it, and you go do it again.
So how far is right there? 200 yards, 2 feet?
Oh, no.
10 feet, maybe. Yeah.
He would be at the wall.
Oh, okay.
And that's at the end of the wing, so, you get a long wing from a glider, and so he'd be...
Close.
Oh,
Yeah, within
pretty close.
40 feet probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know, but...
That's why formation also is important. So if you didn't have an ex-military pilot, you'd have to have somebody who really knew what they were flying. And that's why some of the civilian pilots that I interviewed anyways said, "Well, I can do all that stuff." I said, "Well, how much experience do you have flying formation?" And, "Well, why do I need that?" I said, "Well, there are times and tests where we have to do that because we compare different things, and that's a requirement."
Of course.
And the T28 was a bear to fly formation because of that squirrely canopy. It wasn't a T28 canopy. A T28 canopy is clear. It's like a fighter. You can see I flew one once, and I said, "I can't believe it."
You flew one what?
I flew another T28 that had a real
T28.
canopy, and I said, "This is something you can see." But we had the boards along the side, and we had, it was a big, heavy canopy. And I don't know where Tom sat, but where I sat, the board was right, that bar along the side seemed to always be right in the way.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to,
Just
if you weren't a comfortable formation flyer, you wouldn't manage that bird.
Yeah.
In fact, we've got some pictures that Tom Warner wanted to take pictures. This was just PR pictures. We went by Mount Rushmore in the
that's not that
T28.
far.
Did you?
Yeah.
I was flying formation on his, I was flying formation on him.
Sure.
And he was flying his, no, it's not a Cirrus, but it's a Columbia flew formation is Columbia.
So in formation, someone leads and someone follows?
Yep. Lead is stable and they set the power setting, and then the guy on the wing does all the jockeying.
To stay as close as possible?
Yep.
And they just lock in?
Just as an aside, Pete was screwing with me one day while we were flying that. He was flying the glider, the Spitfire. And he looks over at me and he kind of smiles and he pulls the nose of the glider up and it gets slower and slower and slower. And I start putting flaps down, I'm getting slower, I'm adding power. Now I'm full flaps, full power, nose is in the air, and I'm trying to hang with him until I just can't anymore. And I fall off, and you can kind of hear him laugh. And I cleaned it all up, and then I came racing back up over the top of him, and he said, "You bastard, I wish I could do that with this airplane."
Yeah, the glider is not very maneuverable. T28 was.
He was winding up his rubber band.
Yeah,
That's right, he's back there getting it tight.
Let's see. So are you guys thrill seekers? Why would pilots want to fly not just a T-28, but this T-20, storm penetrating? You guys like the thrills? Be frank with history now.
Where can you have an opportunity to explore the envelope? How many people go into a thunderstorm? I think probably the disappointing thing about the project, for all these projects, except for a very few, it was difficult for me to tell where this information was going to do the average pilot some good. The good would have got, Charlie gave several seminars where you would actually clear the air when people said, "Oh, well, if I've been told if I get into a thunderstorm, just go straight through." And I remember you telling me the story where no, that's probably not what you want to do. You want to do is turn around and go the other way. And so personal experience we can carry to the aviation community, but the number of people that you would be exposed to, unless you gave seminars to try and tell what was going on, you would hope that the data that was being collected would be disseminated. And that got lost in the shuffle somewhere.
Yeah, that's the disappointing part, is that most of the data was funneled strictly to technical research.
Right.
When there was a practical application that we probably missed. I wrote one article for a safety magazine, something, I've got a copy, but it's Dancing with Thor, or Challenging Thor, some spicy title. Thor topless or something, I don't know. But anyway, it was interesting because I wrote the article, and my recommendation, as Tom said, is you get any part of a thunderstorm, turn around and get out.
Do a 180, literally.
Yeah, do a 180, and I've had argued with pilots that say, "You can't." I said, "Hey, I've done 360s in thunderstorm. Don't tell me you can't. You can do it." How do you think we got out when it got really, really tough? We turned and got out when it got more than...
Don't just turn left, don't turn right, don't go up, don't go down, go back.
Yeah, it's, if you're just getting in, go back. And that's what I think happened to the astronaut. And the FAA guidance in their publication, I got in a big argument with the FAA, and they wouldn't back down. I said, "Who wrote this that says go through?" I said, "Do you know what that means?" "Well, I said, "Turn around, go back." "Well, you can't." I said, "No, that's not true."
Why do they think you can't? Because
They think you'll lose control if you make a turn in a thunderstorm.
Because there's too much turbulence?
Yeah,
Or?
but that's all a myth. The important thing is you can. Anyway, I wrote the article, and then the guy that bought the T28 that parted it out.
Oh, just last year or so?
Yeah, Mr. Clark. He was kind of sympathetic to us, although at first he was hostile, us getting the T28 back. But he said, "I do have to admit to you that I read your article, and I was on a trip in my whatever." He flew light civilian single engine to Bermuda or somewhere, and he said, "Somehow I got in this terrible thunderstorm." And he said, "I did a 180-degree turn because I just read this article and got out, and I'm here." So one testimonial of somebody that said, and I'm firmly convinced there are thunderstorms you can get through, but the wise choice is to turn back, because back is much, you're only going to go back through what you came in. And people have no concept. Depends on each thunderstorm is different, but they have no concept what it's like in the middle or
Right.
going out the other side. And you're going blind. I mean, even if you got radar and you're saying, well, I'll get out of the red part to go through, and Tom has more experience with the radar and the airlines, you still have no clue what you're gonna hit. And if you hit hail, that's gonna, because the hail that hit us, because I've only come out of a thunderstorm twice. We had an emergency procedure because the thunderstorm is like this and we're cutting slices, getting deeper to get data.
Oh, with each
With
successive pass.
Each pass,
You're moving
that's what Andy
laterally
would do,
toward
is
the-
move us into the higher decibel level.
At about the same altitude?
Yeah, and
Okay.
unless they wanted to change altitudes for some
But
reason.
you move toward the.
Yeah, so it's a scientific approach. And of course, when you're going this way, your escape is a 90 right brake. If you're coming this way, 90 left brake. And twice I've used that because the first time was in Denver and I was outside the thunderstorm to the east going west. And I hear the engine missing, going pop, 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 pop. I said, oh gosh. And then I look outside, I'm in the perfectly clear. And this hail's bouncing off the wings, and that's what the popping noise is. But it's blowing out of the top of the storm. So I said, this must be a fairly important storm. But I got inside in the hail, I don't know how big it was, but we put a coffee cup in the wing tip hole that one mashed.
I'm sorry? Oh,
So
okay.
that's probably 2 inches of hail, or 2.5. Anyway, it knocked the hydraulic door open, so that flipped up. I said, ooh, okay. And then I thought I was breaking stuff off the airplane, so I said, told Center I'm making 90 left brake to come out of the storm. And of course, as I start to brake, I'm being a really good test pilot. I'm assessing damage and doing all this. So now I'm inverted.
Oh,
And so I'm saying, oh, and I'm coming down, and Denver Center says, are you okay? I said, I will be when I get right-sided. So I rolled it over, and he said, and what would your next move be? I said, I'm going home. The mission is complete.
the hydraulic door you said, that's not the oil
Just
cover?
the access door on the
Access
column.
door just to refill the hydraulics.
I see.
Yeah, it just popped up. It wasn't a
That's
big-
not the same door as the oil, for the oil though?
It's close.
Different door?
Oh, yes.
Same kind of deal?
Yeah, on the left-hand
Okay.
side right up here, you can see it. And the other time was at Goodland, where I went in and it just, what they did, and Tom, when I first started in thunderstorms, they were just mild-mannered Alfred E. Newman thunderstorms that weren't really that violent, I didn't think. But when we quit the program, we were going in supercell thunderstorms.
Really?
Which are, they'll eat your lunch. They're a little bit scary because they're much worse than the ones I started at the end of the 10 years. The last couple of years, we were doing only supercell, and but anyway, I went into it, and I'm getting ice, I can't see out, and I'm getting hail, I can hear it, but then it gets really loud. And my steely-eyed fearless, I said, that's the loudest I've heard. So I make a 90 brake, and I come out of the clouds, and I look the airplane over. It's okay. So I said, you wuss. So I turned around and said, I'll go back in, Andy, and start where I left off. And I did finish the run.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. But it just, the supercells to me were strong enough that it just, you're pushing the envelope. You were just about to the end of what, don't you think, the T28 would do? Because the generators, we were blowing generators, we were
Now,
putting so much cold water into the generator. We had one in Goodland that blew up, and all the BBs in the ball bearings shredded the front of the airplane. We had BB holes.
they came out, huh?
Yeah, they came
You made your
out
own
several directions. Tom and I had to change that one.
Now, was this a gradual change toward bigger storms? Or was this one specific project where they said, let's do a supercell project?
No, it just seemed that they were moving that direction. They're trying to find bigger and better projects. In order for the scientists to make, as my understanding, in order for them to make money, and justify their position. They have to come up with new things that they need to look for in thunderstorms that the NSF would be interested in funding, because it's all about money. So the National Science Foundation funded us, and so they would propose a project and justify it and saying, okay, we need to go look for this. And the NSF will buy off on it or they won't. And if they would kind of massage the proposal, and when you got the grant, everything is set up. Now they may do this 2 years ahead of time, but eventually you'll get to this point where the project moves forward with funding from the NSF. And certainly the demise of the whole program in general was, I think, lack of funding from the NSF. They decided to spend their $85 million on a G5 with a...
Which can't go in thunderstorms.
Yes.
They don't have anything to go in thunderstorms.
Not anymore.
But, yeah, it was a progression. In other words, we found everything. It used to be the thunderstorms were level 6. They had levels of how severe they were, and level 6 was the most severe. But when I started, thunderstorms I went through compared to the ones I went through at the very end, no comparison. I mean, you'd get hit by a little hail and a little ice and a little turbulence, but nothing like supercell. And they didn't even, I think the technology moved on. They were obviously were supercells, but they didn't know what they were. And essentially, it's, as I understand it from the pilot's perspective, it may be two that grow together and become the superstorm, or they just develop. I've looked up at them, they're at 50-something, and I'm at 22 or 23 saying, holy mackerel, I'm going in there? And then you say, yep.
Part of the issues were that the ground radar is a weather radar, and they will pan low, and then they would come up, and they might see you with the radar as they continue to scan up and they would take a look at what they referred to as the DBZs, which are basically the concentration of precipitation, and they decide, okay, well, we'd like to take a look at this. Having said that, okay, we want you to penetrate at 22,000 feet and go on this heading. Well, thunderstorms, the dynamics of a thunderstorm change very quickly, and it may be 2 minutes before they actually paint you again. But even if it's a minute, where they see you on the scan up, they missed you on the scan down, so they really don't know where you are in reference to this growing center of excessive turbulence and weather and high DBZs, and all of a sudden you're in the thick of it where it was not their intent, but there you are.
Sometimes we got a little deeper by taking slices. Right. Now, one thing they did do, we downtracked our GPS, which then they had a program, Andy can go into that in more detail, a program where they took our GPS position and put it on the weather radar, but still there was a delay. And then if he had to go for coffee, who knows, it might have been.
It's kind of what happened in Goodland, where I was having a heck of a ride. The airplane was kind of doing one of these and up and down, and it was kind of a strange ride, and it was very bumpy and lots of thunder and lightning and goings on. And he says, "How you doing up there?" And I said, "Well, it's kind of rough up here." And he goes, "Well, you're right over the top of a tornado, and your escape vector is." And he'd never met me to be there. It was just that he didn't know where I was exactly in the storm, and then all of a sudden this sort of developed around me. When he finally found me, there I was, right in the thick of it. So he gave me an escape vector, and I went.
And he was telling you to take it?
Yeah. He says, "This is your escape vector," and I said, "Good idea." And off I went.
Yeah.
And recovered. Sort of.
Yeah, I think that we were probably at the end, in my estimation, we were maxing out the T28, because I guess we couldn't go 6 or 7 missions without changing a generator or something, in other words. And it's kind of, and Tom's probably the same thing, when you're in the middle of a thunderstorm, you smell smoke. It's just not the most calming feeling in the world, and that's what you smell when the generator goes out, because it'll burn. And so you know what it is. You say, "Hey, I'm in the middle of a thunderstorm, I've got a generator failure, I'm coming out." But I think we were pushing the airplane about as far as it would go.
In terms of wind, or in terms of hail, or lightning, or
Just-
what was the,
Total severity of,
just
The
everything?
environment.
yeah, and icing. Our people would never believe if you got a really wet, powerful thunderstorm, how quick you can get 4 inches of ice on the wings.
How-
And when you get it, we had no wing de-icing, no tail de-icing. So you just sink, like Tom did to start the engine. You sink till you get below the freezing level, and it warms up and everything melts off and you're okay.
You just visually watch it?
Yeah.
Well, canopy will clear and then you'll start
Oh, I
seeing
see.
things going. The only time that didn't happen, I went in and I knew I was icing because the canopy just immediately went boom. And so I'm slowing down, I'm coming down. All of a sudden I'm going up, I'm speeding up. And I came out the other side and all the ice was gone because the hail beat it off. But that's not the recommended way to de-ice an airplane is with hail.
Fight fire with fire, huh?
But it worked. But yeah, and the tail, first time that happened to me, the tail ice would ice up, same as the wings. Well, I'm flying back, and Dan, this is when Dan and I were still flying. He said, now if the tail ice is up when it comes off, you're gonna know it. That's all he said, you're gonna know it. So I'm out of the cloud and I'm warming up, and pretty soon the stick goes, and I said, anything behind me? And that was the ice coming off the tail. Now your tail plane is chucking ice, and so now it's getting cut, and then it settles down. He said, and I got back, I said, does it do kind of like this? He said, yeah. I said, okay, now I know that. So,
How do you know exactly how much ice is on the plane? Does everything have to ice together? There's exactly as much on the canopy as there is on the wings, or not necessarily, or how do you know?
No, not necessarily. We did, Charlie put some black tape along the leading edge. When that was covered up, you had ice. Because
Yeah.
sometimes you have a white wing out there and it's covered with ice that's opaque, you can't really tell how much is there. Well, if you can still see the black tape through it, you only got a little bit. But if the black tape disappears on the leading edge, it's either been taken off by the hail or it's really covered up.
yeah.
But we'd come back on a hot summer day and taxi into the hangar, and the whole cowling would be impacted with ice.
Inside,
Inside,
around the bottom
around
of the
the engine.
cylinder, it'd be inside the cow.
As hot as that engine runs,
Dripping.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, we could take it out.
put it in the ice chest, cool down the water.
So there's a lot of ice.
And I'm guessing as a pilot, you guys as pilot, you very much want to know just how much ice is on your plane, or is there so nothing you can do about it, or don't worry about it?
Well, not much you can do about it, and all you can do is go down and melt it off and come back up.
Okay.
That was the mission, you want to make the mission go, and if you can't fly anymore because you're too heavy with ice, get the ice off and go do it again.
Yeah, it was not a big deal. Some people say, well, gee, you had that much ice. Well, it just,
How do T28s fly in general? What kind of plane is this? What does it feel like?
It was a multi-service aircraft, introduced in 46 and 47. There are many different variations of it. The one we had was initially the A model, but they took that out and put a much larger engine on it when they refabbed the airplane with the armor plating. So it had 1,430 horsepower Wright 1820 engine on it, 9-cylinder radial engine, and it was originally designed as a trainer. The Navy had the larger engines to take off from their carriers, and the Air Force had a D-rated 750 or 760
yeah,
horse.
small engine by comparison, about half the size.
Same kind, Wright 1820, but it was a D-rated to 100 or 760 horse or
Yeah,
something.
7-something.
And the Air Force had T28s, and it was twin canopy, but it was a trainer.
That's
And-
all it was for.
Yeah.
And the Navy had a hook, so they actually could land it on the carrier.
Right.
And they had dive boards, so they like to have things they can throw out to slow down. Because they used it for weapons delivery. The Navy, see, the Air Force used it strictly for pilot training.
Yeah.
I flew it in pilot training, and that's all it was for. But the Navy actually used it for weapons delivery, and it was used in Vietnam.
Yeah, because I've heard that people use T-28 in Vietnam.
Yes.
That was strictly Navy?
No,
Or that was-
actually it was Air Force. The Navy didn't have any in service then. The Air Force, it was an interesting airplane in Vietnam. Some were used by the Vietnamese Air Force, kinda.
What's that mean?
Well, it was Vietnamese in the airplane. It's got 2 seats. So,
Oh, I see.
yeah, you can figure out who was flying. Then the Laotians were flying them. And those were usually Air America guys in the front seat or somebody.
Wait, what's an Air America guy? That means you?
That's a CIA kind of
Ah.
guys. Laotian War was all mixed up.
Sure.
But it's interesting, the ones in Laos that I saw, you know how we have a star on the side of an airplane, that military airplane? They had a little panel you could slip in the Laotian, because the Laotian symbol was the same as ours, except the middle was different, but the two going out were the same.
And they would just swap out a different
Yeah,
brand.
if the U.S. guy was flying it somewhere and it wasn't combat, it'd have a U.S. marking, and then all of a sudden it would be Laotian, the same guy's flying with his Laotian guy in the back seat.
1 second. No, you're doing just
All right, we
fine.
gotta quit. This is about the time during a mission where Tom has to take